Hey guys, sorry this is a little late. I tried to do a video with all three chapters together and it was too long to post, so I'm having to redo it. Sorry if you hear a little noise in the background. My son's playing right behind me, so you might hear a little voice now and again. You may even see Paw Patrol fly through here. So, chapter 5, number 1. Bod remembers the dance macabre. What other character remembers is Silas. Silas walks the line between life and death, and Bod has freedom of the graveyard, so he kind of does the same thing. They're the only two characters that are kind of on both sides of the fence, so they get to remember what happened. They're the only characters that remember. 2. Bod is very excited the lady in gray dances with him, and what does he ask her, and what does she reply? He asks to ride her horse. She says no. She represents death, and so when you get on her horse, you've passed. So she tells Bod, eventually everybody rides my horse once. It's not your time to ride my horse. So, number 3, Bod happily tells Silas the lady in gray danced with him, and Silas seems upset. He seems upset all through the chapter. Why do you think he would be upset about, the lady in gray and just this live people dancing with the ghosts and then they don't remember? Again, Silas is the only other character who remembers because he can't take part. He's not alive. He's not dead. He'll never actually pass away and ride the lady in gray's horse. In chapter 7, he actually says to Bod, when you kill my kind, we just cease to exist. He'll never be a ghost. He's not gonna ever get all of these things that Bod will get. So it's upsetting to him. He's bothered by it. I mean, he lives a very different life than anybody else lives. 4, what finally distracts Bod from pushing the conversation with Silas any further? It starts to snow. Bod's only seen it a couple of times, so he gets really excited. Just the way a kid would. He's a kid and he's excited about seeing snow. So that's chapter 5. I'm going to see if I can get chapter 6 in here too. Okay, so chapter 6, number 1. Who and why did Bod have a fight with in the graveyard? Bod has actually 2 arguments in chapter 6. He argues with Silas at the very beginning because he wants to go to school, and Silas says, no, we can't protect you at school. Well, Bod stands up for himself. He says, you can't keep me safe forever. What are you going to do when I leave here? What's the deal? And because he stands up for himself, and because he stands up for his family, he says he wants to find the man who murdered his family. Silas makes the decision to let him go to school. And later, when Bod is not being as invisible as he should at school, we're going to discuss that in a minute, Silas gets angry with him again and they have another argument, and Bod thinks he's going to leave the graveyard totally. Liza goes after him and he argues with Liza about leaving without saying goodbye to anybody, and Liza's mad at him. So there are a few arguments in that chapter that you could have written down for number 1. Number 2, how did Bod convince Silas he should go to school? Again, he stands up for himself and he stands up for his family. And Silas is convinced that he's grown up enough. He's still a teenager, but he's grown up enough that he'll send him out into the real world. 3, why was Bod forgettable at school at first? Now remember, he has freedom of the graveyard. So he kind of goes to school, and it's not really that he's fading, because he can really only do that in the graveyard, but he's kind of half faded. It's almost like he's made himself invisible to other people, just to try to fly under the radar. 4, what techniques did Bod use on Mo and Nick? Were they successful? Use a quote from the book to show why or why not. All right, so Mo and Nick are the bullies. Mo is short for Maureen. So Maureen kind of tells Nick what to do because Nick's her muscle. So they bully younger kids, giving them their lunch money. They have younger kids steal for them. And Bod doesn't like it. Bod doesn't like that these little kids are getting taken advantage of. And he starts talking to the younger kids and he's like, why don't you just say you're going to tell on them? And if they don't stop, then you actually tell on them. He essentially tells the first kid, if you don't stop this now, it's never going to stop. And you can't let another person have that kind of power over you. So the kids do. They stop letting Mo and Nick kind of run things. And Mo and Nick find out that it was Bod. And this makes him not invisible anymore. And they start harassing Bod. To the point where Bod leads them back to a graveyard. Not his graveyard, but a graveyard. And fades on them. Mo tells Nick to punch or to hit Bod, and Bod fades. And they're both shocked, and Nick is like, well, he must have run away. Nick, it turns out, is not really bright enough to know that there's something strange about Bod, but Mo is. Mo knows there's something off about Bod and knows that he just disappeared. And then also he uses his fear, is another power he has that ghosts would have in the graveyard, to make somebody afraid so they would leave them alone. So he makes Mo and Nick afraid, Bod does, and they leave. The ghosts in the graveyard, remember, not his graveyard, come out and they say, oh, you're nobody else. We know you. We think it's a really good thing that you scared those two kids. They must have not been good kids. We know Silas. This is a good thing. And we don't think they're done yet, so you should probably keep trying to scare them, whether it be haunting or dream walking or anything like that. So the next thing that happens, why do the police want to take Bod to the station, and how do they escape them? So Mo and Nick keep harassing Bod, and he goes to Nick's house at night and stands outside and dream walks. Now what that is while Nick is sleeping and dreaming, Bod can go into his dreams and kind of influence his dreams. Ultimately ends up scaring Nick pretty badly, to the point that he just kind of shuts down at school and won't help Mo anymore, won't help Mo terrorize anybody, and they don't have any power left. And Nick, the book doesn't talk about Nick being sad about it. He's just totally quiet and stops doing what he was doing. But Mo is miserable because she doesn't have power anymore. So the police find Bod out in the alleyway, like after he's dreamwalked Nick, and Liza had come to talk to him before the police showed up and was saying, you're going to run away. This stinks. You need to say goodbye to people. These people have done these wonderful things for you and you're leaving. So she kind of chews him out and makes him feel bad. And the police come. So Liza disappears, obviously. Liza is a ghost. She disappears and she goes to get Silas, to tell Silas that Bod's actually in real trouble. The cops are taking Bod to the station, and as they're taking him to the station, we learn that one of the cops is actually Mo's uncle. So Bod realizes that he's in some trouble, and he's gonna get known, and if he goes to the station, they're gonna find out that he's living in a graveyard by himself, because for all intents and purposes, he is living by himself. He doesn't have anybody watching them. If you don't believe in ghosts, there's nobody watching this kid. So Silas comes out of nowhere, and the police hit Silas. Now Silas isn't gonna die. We know he's gonna be fine, but he jumps in front of the car and lets the car hit him and falls down on the ground, playing dead. The cops get out of the car. Bod's like, you hit my dad. That's my dad. And Bod gets down on the ground with Silas and is like, you killed my dad. You're Maureen's uncle. You're the police. You just took me because Maureen and I have been fighting. And he's laying it on pretty thick, and essentially the cops start to panic and they go off to the side, and Bod kind of whispers to Silas, like, they're not paying attention. Silas super speeds them out of there to the graveyard, and they're safe. Obviously, Silas is mad, and that's where they have their second fight about Bod not being invisible. Ultimately, though, number 6, they come to an agreement. Bod and Silas come to an agreement that maybe he can't go back to school, obviously, but he can go to the library, he can go to the movies, he can go do things out in the real world, so he can learn how to function when he's no longer part of the graveyard. They want to prepare him, and yet they want to keep him safe. Because at this point, he's done so many things that Silas is afraid that the Jacks can track where he is because the Jacks are looking for clues. Then in number 7 talks about the metaphor, the comparison between fear and a sickness, how fear is contagious. I'm going to think about how fear, like when you go to a scary movie and your friend gets scared and grabs you, and maybe you start to kind of feed off that fear and get scared, or you go camping and a friend tells a scary story and then everybody starts to feed off of it. Fear is contagious, it's catching. Okay? And sometimes people laugh at other people being afraid, but that's another reaction to fear. Fear or being uncomfortable. Sometimes people laugh instead of actually being afraid. And being a teacher, when you correct a student, sometimes they'll laugh, and that can be contagious too. So it's interesting how being uncomfortable, whether it be fear or just you're worried about something, it can manifest itself a lot of different ways. So I asked you for number 7 to kind of give me an example of a time that happened to you. You're welcome to do that. That part isn't going to be on the test. All right. I'm going to stop the video here so that I can upload this one. And then in the next video, I'll do chapter 7.